Hey, Mark, get in here, take a seat, close the door. Yep, that's right, I'm still at home. I'm guessing you're still at home also. I'm hoping to help you through these unpleasant times. I want you to be entertained while you are quarantined. You know why? Because I'm a history teacher, and I'm going rogue. You know, I try not to miss an opportunity to bring history to my students, even if I have to do it with pop culture. You know, music, television, movies. Today I'm sharing my analysis of one of my favorite disaster movies of the 1970s and how it reflected the zeitgeist or the cultural climate of the time. I love a good disaster movie. So today we're looking at Paul Newman and Steve McQueen in the Towering Inferno. Let's go rogue. In 1974, 20th Century Fox was planning a movie based on the 1974 book The Glass Inferno, written by Thomas N. Scotia and Frank M. Robinson. At the same time, Warner Brothers was preparing to make a movie based on a book called The Tower by Richard M. Stern. Both stories were about fires that break out in tall buildings in the higher floors. Knowing that they would be hurting each other, putting out basically the same movie during the same year, something like a White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen situation, Irwin Allen came up with a plan. He convinced 20th Century Fox and Warner Brothers to allow him to produce one film as a joint venture between the two studios. Coming off the success of the Poseidon Adventure, the two studios collaborated, gave him $14 million, and set him to work on what would become the Towering Inferno. Allen next implemented his formula for his disaster movies. Plan the work and work the plan. Part one of the Irwin Allen plan. A big cast with lots of stars, even if they were past their prime. The two main stars were Paul Newman and Steve McQueen. More on them in a minute. But beneath them on the marquee, William Holden, Faye Dunaway, Fred Astaire, Robert Vaughn, Bobby Brady, Dabney Coleman, Richard Chamberlain, Heisman Trophy winner O.J. Simpson. Part 1B of the Irwin Allen formula. Cast two A-personality males as the lead actors that continually butt heads. In the Poseidon Adventure, it was Reverend Scott and Police Lieutenant Mike Rogo. In Towering Inferno, it's going to be Paul Newman and Steve McQueen. Not wanting to give either man top billing in the movie, the opening credits have Steve McQueen's name to the left and Paul Newman's name to the right, but a little bit higher. Left to right, McQueen's name shows up first. Top to bottom, it's Newman's name that shows up first. Furthermore, both actors negotiated for the exact same salary for the film and the exact same number of lines. Egos, man. Enough chest thumping. Paul Newman plays architect Doug Roberts, who has just built the tallest building in the world, a 138-floor glass tower in downtown San Francisco. On the day of its dedication, during a test, a short is detected in its electrical system. Newman pulls out a piece of crispified wire from a power box and notices that the specs that he has established for the electrical system were not followed. A change made by the head electrician on the project, Roger Simmons, played by Richard Chamberlain. What Newman doesn't see is that the short has caused a fire in a nearby utility room. Nice going, Dick. As the party's getting started on the 135th floor promenade room, fire is engulfing the utility room on 81. When it's finally discovered, San Francisco Fire Department is called, and Chief Michael O'Halloran, Steve McQueen, shows up in his red Chevy Monte Carlo. Wouldn't it have been awesome if he'd have driven up in his 1968 Mustang 390 GT with a fastback, like he drove in Bullet? But I digress. Part 2 of the Irwin Allen formula, The Lounge Singer. In the Poseidon Adventure, it was Carol Lindley singing, "There's got to be a morning after." Academy Award. In the Towering Inferno, it was the band in the promenade room during the party with Maureen McCormick singing, "We May Never Love Like This Again." Another Academy Award. Irwin Allen is not the master of disaster, he's the music master. Maureen McGovern? What did I say? Maureen McCormick? You mean it wasn't Marsha from the Brady Bunch? By the time Maureen McGovern is done singing, the flames have left the utility room and are now headed down the hall of 81. McQueen orders the partiers on 135 in the promenade room to come down to the ground floor to finish the celebration. William Holden balks at the order, then sends an elevator down. The elevator stops on 81, the doors open, and the occupants are engulfed in flame. The elevator then returns to the 135th floor. The doors open, and all of the revelers see the charred remains of those that had just left the party a few minutes earlier. To quote Al Michaels near the end of the 1980 Olympic hockey game between the USA and the Soviet Union, "Now we got bedlam." Next element of the Irwin Allen disaster movie formula, a spectacular death. In the Poseidon adventure, it was Larry who had found himself on the bottom of one of the tables after the ballroom had flipped over and then does a backflop into the ceiling lights that have now gone to the bottom of the flipped ballroom. In the Towering Inferno, it was Dan Bigelow, the building's PR rep. He found himself in his office with his secretary, Lori. He was transcribing a letter to her before heading up to the party. They decide to stay away from the party for a little. By the time they're done, the fire has reached Dan Bigelow's office. Bigelow, Robert Wagner, throws a wet towel over his head and decides he's going to make a run for it. I ran the 110 flat. He doesn't make it. He catches on fire, veers off course, and falls through a window and 800 feet to his death. Smoke quickly reaches Lori. In order to get some oxygen, she breaks a window, but the draft just allows more and more fire to enter the room she's in. She gets engulfed in flames. She falls out the window, and she falls 800 feet to her death as well. Kids, let this be a lesson to you. That's what you get for boinking the secretary. That scene was totally ripped off by Roland Emmerich in the movie The Day After Tomorrow, when the meteorologist at the National Weather Service is going with his secretary. The tornado rips through LA and rips that part of the building away from the rest of it. The Towering Inferno did it so much better. All right, Irwin Allen disaster movie element number 4. Put a kid into peril. On 83, with fire lapping all around their apartment, we find Philip and Angela Albright. Mike Lookinland, freaking Bobby Brady, your dad's an architect. You should have known something was up. Paul Newman finds the kids in their apartment and carries them to safety. But as they're heading down the emergency stairs, an explosion rips through a couple of floors of stairs. They're now forced to head back up to 135 to the promenade room with the rest of the crowd. With the fire closing on the 135th floor, Newman Okie rigs the scenic elevator on the outside of the building, allowing it to make one trip to the bottom. 12 people, including Bobby Brady and Angela, who's in the hands of Lizelette. It starts down, but an explosion in the building knocks the elevator off its track and blows a glass panel out. Irwin Allen ingredient number 5. In Poseidon, Gene Hackman gives his life when he jumps on the steam valve and closes it, allowing the other passengers to get by before he drops into some flaming oil. In the Towering Inferno, Lizelette feels herself losing her balance, falling out of the open space created by the broken window. She wheels around, hands Angela to another person in the elevator before she herself falls through the glass and plummets 80 feet to her death on the streets below. The rest of the people in the elevator are saved when Steve McQueen hooks up a cable to the elevator while dangling from a U.S. Navy helicopter, and then the helicopter guides the elevator down to the ground below. All of the women are eventually rescued when the U.S. Navy rescue team establishes a breaches buoy from the Peerless building across the street into the promenade room on 135 of the Glass Tower. Now it's just the men, and now we see why men need women in their lives. Richard Chamberlain, the electrician whose shoddy work sparked the fire, had been drinking all night, and now he hijacks the chair of the breaches buoy and sends himself across to the Peerless building. The shaking of the cable from the Glass Tower causes it to come loose, and Dick falls 135 floors to his death below. Unfortunately, Irwin Allen doesn't capture this with great effect. It's just Richard Chamberlain falling off the bottom of the screen. It would have been so much more satisfying to see the guy that caused this whole mess to fall the 135 floors to the ground below. Like a Hans Gruber or a Dick Jones. Whoa. Irwin Allen, disaster movie element number 7. The Money Shot. Huge, mind-blowing, over-the-top stunt. No CGI. When actors are reacting to explosions, those are actual explosions going off behind them. A large chunk of Allen's budgets were keeping firefighters on hand just out of sight of the cameras. In the movie, as the fire department loses control of the fire, they make a final decision. They're going to blow the water tanks on the top floors of the building to allow the million or so gallons of water to flood the fire and drown the fire out. Those remaining in the promenade room are instructed to tie themselves to something with whatever they can find. McQueen and Newman, they meet up at the water tanks and they set the charges. Then rush down to the promenade room and wait with the rest. As the countdown rolls on, the fire reaches the promenade room. Some are caught in the flames. Then the explosion, and water begins flowing into the room as a torrent. Some get washed away. Others are crushed beneath objects that have fallen in the flow. Nevertheless, it works. The water rushes down through the structure, extinguishing the flames, and the inferno is over. Roll credits. The Towering Inferno was the second highest grossing film in 1974, making $116 million. Second only to Blazing Saddles. If only they'd done the French mistake. Don't be surprised you're doing the French mistake. Voila! The movie was nominated for 9 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. It won 3, for Best Original Song, Best Film Editing, and Best Cinematography. Adjusted for inflation, that $116 million in 1975 equals about $522 million in 2020. The 2018 movie Skyscraper, which was basically a ripoff of the Towering Inferno, made $304 million. So what does the popularity of the Towering Inferno say about American society in the mid-1970s? Again, the disasters of the 1970s, Vietnam, the gas crisis, Richard Nixon. We were lining up to go to see the Towering Inferno as a way of escaping hard times and uncertain conditions in the world around us. We were going to disaster movies to get a break from the personal disasters in our lives. Watching these characters fight through these odds to survive a situation is quite cathartic, actually, especially people facing their own difficult situations, like a COVID-19 quarantine. The stories help us know what survival looks like and work through them, and we think, man, if Fred Astaire or Bobby Brady could survive this situation, certainly I can. Or on the other side of the coin, man, if I can survive this, I could be like Steve McQueen or Paul Newman or Newman and McQueen. On a less psychological level, public interest was peaking in skyscrapers in the early 1970s. We had just completed the World Trade Center with its twin towers, both 100 stories, over 100 stories, above the streets of Lower Manhattan. Their height was eclipsed by the Sears Tower in Chicago, which rose 110 stories above the streets of Chicago. And while the public wondered how high we could go, there was also some trepidation. How would we actually fight fires in the upper stories of those buildings? That became apparent just weeks into the shooting of the Towering Inferno. On February 1st, 1974, an air conditioner sparked a fire on the 12th floor of the 25-story Jolma building in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Within 20 minutes, the entire building was engulfed in flames. 179 people died and 300 people were injured. This was less than 2 years after another deadly high-rise fire in Sao Paulo that killed 16 people and injured 330. So, where were you in 1974? Did you go out and see the Towering Inferno when it was on the big screen? Did you go out and get all that Irwin Allen action? Heck, I wasn't even alive in 1974. Well, you're not a better person for it. See it on Netflix. Rent it from Blockbuster. You need to see this movie. I had fun, but I'll quit my day job. And next time you're on the 145th floor of a tall building that's on fire, and you're trying to figure out how to get down to the bottom floor, remember me. I'm Mark Hackett. I'm a history teacher, and I've gone rogue.